At 2:45 p.m., Flight 6117 from Chicago to Denver had just passed through its second patch of turbulence. Most passengers clutched armrests or leaned toward their windows, trying to distract themselves from the shudder of metal. In row 18B, Emma Keller sat with her hands folded on her lap, a thin paperback tucked between her knees. She hadn't turned a page in over 10 minutes. Her face was neutral, almost still. The only movement was the slow rise and fall of her chest, her breathing steady, deep, almost practiced. She wore a plain gray sweater and loose black pants, the kind you'd see on someone who didn't want to be remembered. Her hair was pulled into a low, slightly messy bun. No jewelry, no makeup, no phone in hand. She hadn't spoken since boarding, and while that wouldn't normally matter, something about her silence stood out. As the plane gave a sudden jolt, a woman 2 rows back let out a short gasp. Emma blinked once, then went still again. No flinch, no reaction, just that slow breathing, like she was counting it. A man across the aisle noticed her first. He nudged his wife and gestured with his chin. She looked, held her gaze for a second too long, then whispered something he nodded to. Behind them, a college-aged girl with neon earbuds half in her ears glanced at Emma. Squinting. A subtle discomfort was taking shape, one that had little to do with the turbulence. People were watching her, not for what she did, but what she didn't. Flight attendants rolled the drink cart past her row without a glance. Emma didn't lift her head. She didn't ask for anything, didn't shift in her seat. The man in 17C muttered under his breath and shook his head. Someone 2 rows back chuckled like they were in on a joke. No one said aloud. A little girl in 18C stared at Emma with wide eyes, her hands wrapped around a stuffed unicorn. Emma turned slightly and gave her the smallest of nods, then returned to stillness. The girl smiled. Barely. The plane rattled again. Emma exhaled once through her nose. Nothing about her said danger, but nothing said comfort either. She was just there, still as air, and the rest of the cabin didn't know what to do with that. At 2:52 p.m., another bump sent the overhead bins creaking. A businessman in a navy blazer let out a nervous laugh and leaned toward the woman beside him, a blonde in a bright pink jacket scrolling on her phone. He nodded toward Emma and whispered something sharp under his breath. The woman looked up, studied Emma for half a second, then rolled her eyes. Seriously, she hasn't blinked in 20 minutes. Must think she's above the rest of us. Her voice was low, but not that low. The businessman smirked, loosened his tie, and chuckled a little louder than necessary. The sound caught the attention of a couple across the aisle. Mid-50s, dressed like they were coming from a golf tournament. The husband glanced over, then whispered something to his wife. She nodded. Their expressions matched the others now. Judging, dismissive. Sure, of something that had never been said aloud. 3 rows back, a little girl had started to cry, the kind of soft, scared crying that built up with every rattle of the plane. Her mom tried to shush her, rubbing her back, offering a juice box. Nothing worked. The girl's eyes darted around until they landed on Emma. Emma didn't say a word. She didn't move. She just kept breathing, slow, steady. The girl stared at her wide-eyed and sniffling. Then she tried to match her breath to Emma's. It took a few tries, but the crying slowed, and then stopped. The pink-jacketed woman glanced over again and scoffed. Cold as ice, she muttered. Doesn't even flinch. The businessman nodded like he'd already decided who Emma was. No one saw the girl wipe her eyes on her sleeve and take another deep breath. Only Emma did. And she didn't even need to look. By 3:00 p.m., the murmurs had turned into full conversations. A teenager in a hoodie, earbuds dangling from one ear, leaned toward his friend and tilted his chin at Emma. She's acting like she's not even on the same flight. His voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for the row in front of him to hear. The man in 17C turned around and gave a quick nod, like someone had finally said what he'd been thinking. She hasn't smiled. She hasn't moved. Who does that? The woman next to him whispered back. Her eyes kept darting toward Emma like she was waiting for her to crack. But Emma didn't. She remained still. The same slow breath pattern. Hands on her lap. Eyes on nothing in particular. That steadiness, which had calmed a child just moments ago, now felt threatening to everyone else. The businessman across the aisle shifted in his seat. "Bet she thinks she's better than us," he said with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The influencer in pink looked up from her phone and let out a short laugh. Or she's hiding something. I don't trust people who stay that calm. The older woman behind them leaned toward her husband and muttered, "Maybe she's on something." Her husband nodded without hesitation. The air in the cabin thickened. More people stared. Not openly. Just long enough to let their imaginations go to work. Emma sat in the middle of it all, untouched by the noise, untouched by the stories forming around her. But she felt it. You could see it in the slight shift of her shoulders, the extra pause before her next breath. The crowd didn't see that. All they saw was someone they couldn't explain, and they didn't like not having an answer. At 3:04 p.m., the cabin door slammed open. 5 men stormed in from the front galley, dressed in dark clothing, faces hidden beneath masks. One of them grabbed a flight attendant, Jessica, by the collar and shoved her forward, pressing a compact pistol to her temple. His voice cut through the cabin like gravel. Nobody move. Everything that had been simmering exploded. Passengers screamed. Some dropped to the floor. Others reached for their phones or ducked behind seats. A baby started wailing somewhere near the back. The smell of sweat, fear, and recycled air mixed into something choking. The hijackers moved fast. One stood at the cockpit door, another near the rear lavatory. The tallest one barked out demands. 50 million. A clear runway. No tricks. Through it all, Emma stayed seated. Her breathing didn't change. Her hands were still on her lap, her eyes focused straight ahead. One of the masked men glanced her way and kept moving. She didn't flinch. The little girl next to her was frozen, clutching her stuffed unicorn, eyes huge and wet. Emma blinked slowly. That was it. A man in 15A stood halfway out of his seat, red in the face. Why the hell is she just sitting there? His voice cracked. He pointed. Look at her. She's not scared. She's with them. I bet she's one of them. A ripple of agreement followed. Someone gasped. A woman in the aisle seat covered her mouth. The teenage boy in the hoodie nodded. Yeah, she's way too calm. Another man tried to get up, shouting to the crew, restrain her, tie her up or something. She's freaking people out. The panic had found its outlet. Their fear needed a shape, and Emma was giving them nothing. She didn't move, didn't argue. Her gaze stayed soft, her posture relaxed. That silence made people angrier than screams ever could. The flight attendant who had been handing out water earlier stumbled down the aisle, face pale, trying to speak over the chaos. Jessica's voice cracked from the front. Please, please do what they say. The hijacker shoved her against the wall near the cockpit. Every word raised the tension in the cabin higher. And still, Emma didn't speak, didn't twitch. The storm was here, and she was still as a stone in the center of it. At 3:07 p.m., the fear began to boil over. The shouting from the front had slowed, but the cabin itself was now a storm. People huddled low, breathing fast, looking around like the next threat could come from anywhere. And every time their eyes passed over Emma, they didn't move on. A man near the emergency exit snapped. She's not even scared. She hasn't moved since they came in. His voice cracked with panic, and others started nodding. She's with them, said a woman from across the aisle. It made no sense, but no one needed it to. Logic had been replaced by fear. Emma didn't answer. Her eyes were calm, focused, measured. She glanced once at the woman next to her and said softly, "They won't fire. Not yet." That made it worse. The woman recoiled, eyes wide. How do you know that? A teenager stood up and pointed straight at Emma. She knows something. I heard her talking to someone. She's going to get us all killed. The pink blazer woman turned in her seat. I said she was trouble. I knew it. This plane's a trap and she's sitting here like she planned the whole thing. Another voice joined in. Get her off this flight. Someone stop her. Hands began to move, people shifting in their seats, ready to do something, anything, just to feel control again. Emma's gaze didn't flinch. Her wrist slid back just slightly under her sleeve. Her fingers tapped twice, paused, then once more. Small movements. Invisible. Unless you knew what to look for. In a low-lit operations room hundreds of miles away, a green dot blinked to life on a digital map. A man in uniform leaned closer to the screen. Agent Keller in position, he said. Back on the plane. A baby cried from the rear, and someone whispered a prayer. Emma closed her eyes for just a second, not from fear, from focus. She was surrounded by panic, by accusations, by strangers pointing fingers and shaking with rage, but she didn't move. Her calm no longer confused them. It scared them. That's what made it dangerous. And that's what made them certain. Emma Keller was not like the rest of them, and they had no idea what she was about to do. At 3:12 p.m., the mother of the crying girl leaned close to Emma, whispering with trembling lips. What are they going to do? Emma didn't hesitate. They won't shoot. Not yet. They need leverage. Her tone was quiet, firm, but someone in the next row heard it. She's talking to them. She knows what they're planning. The voice sliced through the panic like a match to dry kindling. Heads turned, a dozen eyes locked on Emma, the same ones that had been watching, waiting, and now, accusing. The teenage boy stood again. I knew it. She's with them. Get her. Emma rose, slow, deliberate, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Her voice was low but clear. Your biggest mistake? Letting me sit here too long. No one had time to answer. She stepped into the aisle. One smooth pivot brought her in front of the lead hijacker. His gun barely twitched before her hand snapped it sideways, disarming him with one twist and a strike to his throat. He dropped without a sound. The next rushed toward her. Emma spun, caught his arm mid-swing, and drove her elbow into his jaw. He collapsed hard. Two more moved at once. She ducked low, swept one off his feet, and struck the other in the ribs. Both fell, gasping. The fifth tried to run. Emma caught his shirt collar and slammed him against a seat back. He crumpled to the floor. The cabin froze. Everything was silent except for the rasp of someone breathing too fast and the distant hiss of air from the vents. 5 men were down, their weapons kicked far from reach. Emma didn't gloat, didn't smile. She looked around once, then stepped back to her seat, eyes still alert. No one said a word. Even the mother holding the girl couldn't speak. She just stared. It had taken 17 seconds, maybe less, but everything had changed. At 3:15 p.m., the cabin was quiet in a way that didn't feel real. People stayed frozen in their seats. Some blinked slowly, like they were still catching up. A woman in the back wiped tears from her cheeks without even realizing she was crying. One man leaned forward, his hand over his chest, lips moving silently in prayer. The little girl beside Emma looked up, voice barely louder than a whisper. I knew she was going to protect us. Her mother didn't speak. She just held her tighter and nodded slowly, eyes still locked on Emma's calm face. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. Law enforcement is boarding now. Please remain seated. His tone was firm but shaken. The cabin stayed still. Within seconds, boots hit the floor. 4 armed officers moved quickly down the aisle, weapons raised but held with care. Behind them walked a tall man in tactical gear, silver buzz cut, eyes sharp. He scanned the scene, stopped when he saw Emma, and gave a single, clean salute. Emma nodded once. That was it. No smile, no thanks, just acknowledgement. Someone near the front whispered, "Agent Keller." The name passed like a ripple. No one said anything else, but the weight of it landed hard. The businessman who had mocked her now stared at the floor. The teenager in the hoodie pulled his sweatshirt tighter, avoiding her gaze. The woman in the pink blazer sat with her arms folded, trying not to shake. Emma leaned down and picked up her bag. Her hands were steady. She didn't look at anyone as she moved back to her seat. She didn't need to. For her, it was done. The mission was over. She didn't celebrate. She didn't explain. She simply waited for the next moment to come. And when it did, she'd be ready. At 3:42 p.m., the plane rolled to a stop. The flashing lights from law enforcement trucks lit the windows, then faded as the cabin lights came on. People stayed seated, unsure if it was okay to move. The crew gave the signal. A few belts clicked open, slow and uncertain. Emma stood first. She reached for her bag, slipping the strap over her shoulder without a word. As she stepped into the aisle, the businessman in the navy blazer was already there. He looked smaller now, like the air had been knocked out of him. He opened his mouth, once, then again, before settling on just 2 words. "I'm sorry." Emma nodded once, eyes steady, then kept walking. The woman in the pink blazer was next. She avoided looking at Emma at all. She kept her eyes on the floor, twisting her ring. When Emma passed, she whispered something under her breath. Maybe it was sorry. Maybe it wasn't. The teenager in the hoodie stared straight ahead. His earbuds were back in, but he wasn't listening to anything. His face was red. When Emma reached his row, he took them out and said, "I didn't know. I was wrong." She paused only long enough to meet his eyes, then moved on. At the exit, a woman who had screamed the loudest reached out and gently touched Emma's sleeve. "I didn't see you. I just saw what I was afraid of." Her voice broke on the last word. Emma gave her the same quiet nod. Not cold, just final. By 4 p.m., social media had caught up. Someone had filmed the takedown. Another had posted a video of Emma sitting calm while the others panicked. A thread with stills from the flight gained traction within minutes. Comment sections filled with apologies, anger, shame. Reporters confirmed her identity. Former Army, now federal counterterrorism, a career in silence. By evening, headlines followed. The businessman was placed on leave by his firm. The influencer's brand dropped her. A few passengers disabled their accounts. No one had expected the world to see what they said, what they did. Emma didn't check any of it. She stepped off the plane, phone still in her pocket, walking like it was just another day. Not a victory, not a lesson, just done. At 4:12 p.m., Emma stepped down the metal stairs onto the tarmac, the wind tugging gently at the hem of her sweater. The sky had cleared. Pale sunlight spilled across the concrete. Behind her, the passengers exited in slow lines, some still quiet, others glancing around like they weren't sure if it was really over. Halfway across the lot, a small voice called out. Emma turned her head just slightly. The little girl was in her mother's arms now, her bunny tucked under one arm, her other hand waving with all her might. Emma gave her a small, steady smile, not wide, but real. She kept walking. Near the glass doors of the terminal, an older woman stepped into her path. Her voice was soft, but steady. "I judged you. I thought you didn't care. I was wrong." Emma didn't flinch. She didn't rush to make her feel better. She just held the woman's eyes and said, "It's okay." Then she nodded once, the way someone does when they've already let it go. The woman stepped aside, wiping her eyes. Emma moved forward. There were people waiting near the doors, security, a few reporters, someone from her agency. She didn't speed up, didn't slow down. Her steps were measured, quiet, grounded. No applause, no recognition, just movement. By the time she reached the terminal, the others had faded behind her. Their words, their judgments, their noise, all left in the space she chose not to fill. And just like that, she was gone. If you've ever been judged before someone knew your name, this story is for you. If you've ever walked into a room and felt people assume the worst, even when you've done nothing at all, this story is yours. Because strength doesn't always wear a uniform, and sometimes it doesn't say a word. Real strength doesn't need to shout to be heard. It stays steady when the room panics. It listens when others point fingers. It waits, not because it's weak, but because it knows when to move. People may call it cold, distant, detached. But those who've been through something, who've seen things, lost things, learned the hard way, they know. They recognize it. Emma didn't fight for credit. She didn't ask for recognition. She saved a plane full of people who couldn't see past their own fear. And when they saw her for who she truly was, it changed them. Not all at once, but it stayed. And maybe that's enough. If you've ever felt overlooked, misunderstood, or pushed aside, just know you're not alone. You don't have to prove anything to people who never tried to understand you. You just have to be ready for your moment. And when it comes, they'll know, just like they knew her. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and walk with us through the stories that remind us who we really are.